Coming up on this edition of the Paw Report, my friend Quigley and I will be talking to his owner, Jean Fisher from Villa Grove, about all things dog. Jean does agility, she also knows about legislation with pets, and we'll also talk about being a good dog steward. So stay tuned, that's all coming up next on the Paw Report. Production for the Paw Report is made possible by
Inyart Tire and Auto Center in Charleston and Mattoon. Inyart offers complete auto repair. Inyart Tire and Auto Center cares about our community and thanks you for being a responsible pet owner. More information at inyart.com.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Paw Report. I'm your host, Kate Pleasant, and I'm joined today by Jean Fisher from Villa Grove. And Jean is kind of just an overall dog person, would you say?
Yep, absolutely.
So do you want to tell us, first of all, Jean, a little bit about you and how you got interested in dogs, and then we'll go from there about what we're going to talk about today.
Sure. First of all, when I was young, I wanted to become a certified veterinary technician or a veterinarian, and I decided that I'd take the certified veterinary technician path. I always loved animals, didn't matter, horses, dogs, and I did some training at home when I was younger, but I never got into the competition aspect of that. I became employed at the University of Illinois Veterinary Medicine Teaching Hospital and was employed there for many, many years. And during that process, I decided that I wanted to play with dogs more competitively, so train them and show them and in various different areas. And then I decided to I was being bugged by many people to give classes, training classes and lessons and such. And so for many years now, I've been doing that.
Okay, so you kind of do it all.
I kind of do it all.
And we have Quigley here. Quigley's standing over here, and Quigley's one of your show dogs, right?
Yep.
What are his accomplishments like?
Quigley is a multiple agility champion, an AKC agility champion, and he also does herding trials. And then he is almost a confirmation champion.
Wow,
so we just
couple
have
points you need, huh?
Yep, just a few more points there, and we'll have that done too.
Great. And so he's a Sheltie, right? For those people that may not know his breed at home. So you have other dogs at home, right?
I have a few other dogs.
Just a few.
I have a few other dogs. There are a few geriatric dogs, some retired show dogs.
Great.
Yes, a Belgian sheepdog, and then IBs and hounds, a couple IBs and hounds.
Yeah, and they total up in the 9 or 10 factor there.
Yeah,
huh?
yep. And
Sounds
then
like
also a rescue too. We have
Sure.
a rescue rehome dog. We always have one of them around, and he's becoming aged too.
Well,
so.
that's great. So we were going to talk today about being a good dog steward and being a good neighbor with a dog. So do you kind of want to talk about the things that surround that? How do we be good dog stewards?
Sure. Well, I think it starts out with when a family decides that they want to get a dog or a puppy. It starts out first with doing some research to determine what would work well in your situation, whether a large dog, a small dog, an active dog, a dog that needs special nutrition requirements or special grooming requirements. To figure out what would fit your lifestyle best. A large dog may not work very well in an apartment situation. And then also time aspects. How much time can you devote to training and exercising a dog? Sometimes puppies, of course, generally are more energetic and need your devotion more there. So once you've gone through and kind of made those decisions and figured out that sort of a aspect, it's a good idea to then do a little research on the breed a little bit. there, and once that's a good fit, things that you want to investigate are training classes. You know, how much do those cost, and involved in there. And then, of course, starting from the beginning, whether it's a rehome situation or a new puppy, you want to, you know, bond with the dog. Take those training classes, make sure that they do learn basic commands and such. And those aspects will follow through as far as being a good neighbor, being able to call your dog back to you in situations. When you go on walks, trying to have the dog kind of be focused on you. You want to be proactive and make sure that if there are any sort of dangerous situations that might come up walking across the street, or if there's a dog in a backyard fenced area that might trigger to your dog, trying to keep your dog calm and avoiding a situation like that. Always, of course, you know, when you go on a walks, you want to have a leash, you know, abide by any of the local ordinances, having your dog be on leash. And then things like, you know, walking with, you know, different receptacles to
little attachments.
Yeah, to pick up any waste that the dog might leave behind, so that, you know, it doesn't get left behind, so that you can pick that up and your neighbors are appreciative of that. And, you know, making sure that your dog walks on leash nicely and it doesn't run loose through the neighborhood.
Most places have leash laws as well, so.
Right.
Make sure that you're abiding by those.
Right, exactly. And then things like, you know, trying to keep your dog healthy. If, you know, you're approached by a friend or a neighbor or even a stranger from that standpoint. If your dog is in training, you want to make sure that you know, you kind of make them know that your dog is in training, and so that they don't rush up to the dog. If you would like to have your dog petted, you can certainly ask them if they can pet your dog and help to socialize it, maybe give it a treat or two, or other things like, you know, telling children not to come up and rush the dog. A lot of times you walk up with, you know, you can introduce yourself. A friendly greeting would be to your back of your hand. And then once the dog figures out and gets your smell and scent and realizes you're not trying to harm them, then, you know, generally they're pretty good about that.
Because they still have their instincts, you know, so I'm sure it's important to remember that.
They still have their instincts too. And certainly young dogs, you know, the person might want to make sure that their dog doesn't jump on the you know, the visitor, and you know, slowly work that in. So those are good things. Things around the house, of course, are to you know, be a kind neighbor. You know, if you don't have a fenced backyard, try not to let your dog just run loose. You know, certainly safety factors. You could lose your dog, and you know, we enjoy our dogs, so we don't want to lose them.
Right.
And then you know, if there is a fence in the neighborhood and maybe the neighbor has another dog, trying not to let, sometimes you can run into barrier situations where dogs can run back and forth and bark and tend to get a little aggressive, and so trying to not to let situations like that happen. It might involve going to the neighbor and saying, hey, you know, we're trying to work on this, or I noticed that your dog is doing this. You know, it's much better to try and talk to your neighbor and work things out and discuss situations than to, you know, receive a knock on the door from the local animal control.
Or the police, you
Or
know,
the
if they've
police.
complained about noise or aggression or something like that.
Exactly.
So.
You know, trying not to let your dog out too late at night, or leaving them out and they, you know, allowing them to bark at 2 in the morning. Those things, those situations don't create good neighbors. So, you know, being a good steward with dogs is the best way to go.
So pay attention. In other words, if you hear your dog out barking in the yard, probably need to put it back in.
Right, right. Pay attention, be respectful. You know, if your dog doesn't normally bark in the yard and they are, go out and see what's going on. You know, maybe there's something in the yard that's not, you know, that you don't want to have there. So, you know, go out, pay attention. You know, if you have a fenced backyard, you know, constantly go out, you know, and check and make sure that there isn't an avenue for your dog to get loose, that they've dug under the fence a little, or, you know, some loose fencing. So make sure that you keep your fence repaired.
Okay. And you also work with a group that deals with dog and animal legislation, is that right?
Correct.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that group? Tell us, you know, kind of what that is and some of the maybe upcoming legislation that's going on.
Sure, sure. I work with a group. It's statewide in Illinois. It's called the Illinois Federation of Dog Clubs and Owners. It is comprised of over 43 dog clubs within the state. They can be conformation to obedience or agility, herding. It just, any club that would like to join as a club can belong. And also just general dog owners. You don't have to belong to a club. You can join as well. And our club is a very good group as far as keeping even the general public updated on legislation that might happen within the state of Illinois. So anything from leash laws to trying to work with rescues to trying to work with health issues. A big thing that has been popping up is puppy mill legislation, but trying to protect dogs in general, and also trying to cut through some of the misinformation that kind of gets around, kind of hearsay and rumors. So our group is very good with trying to break up what's good about legislation and what's maybe not so good about legislation, but in trying to encompass responsible legislation that will be good for the general public.
As well as pet owners and pets.
Pet owners and pets.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things right now that are going on that people might be interested or need to know about, really?
Right. Some of the issues that have been going on are involved with, again, leash laws, tethering.
I know tethering is a big one. Do you want to talk about that right now and what the laws are and what they're trying to push through?
Sure. And one of the things is that Illinois has been stated, has been rated and ranked by some of the animal welfare advocates as far as being the #1 state in the country, as far as being most proactive and dealing with restrictions and protections on dogs in general. And the Illinois Animal Welfare Act comprises a lot of information dealing with what you can and what you can't do with your dogs. You know, good general common sense things like making sure a dog is provided with adequate shelter, food, and water, and that they're, you know, maintained in healthy aspects. And so it's very good laws that we already have on the books, and what really needs to happen is the enforcement of the existing laws. Some things that have been happening with the tethering aspect, typically what is promoted or mentioned in the media involves pit bulls or dogs that might be bigger and have had a little bad PR, so to speak, and dealing with, you know, chaining them up and trying not to keep dogs, quote, chained. But some of the legislation that involves that is can encompass just a general person, many people that you might know, somebody that may exercise their dog on a little chain or a tie-out line for a short amount of time. You could have some senior citizens who can't necessarily get out and walk their dogs. people who are handicapped, people that live in zero lot line homes and apartments that can't fence in an area.
Sure.
And you know, and every day you can't necessarily get out every day and take a half an hour walk with your dog. So, you know, putting them out on a little tie out isn't that detrimental to the dog.
The people that leave them out on them.
It's the people that leave.
Constantly.
Well, if they don't fit within the confines of the law, if they don't have adequate food, water, or shelter. So, but you know, sometimes what happens is the legislation is a very good thought, but then it entails encompassing people who aren't lawbreakers. And then what can happen is folks who might live in a situation like that may decide that they need to give up their dog because they don't want to face fines or restrictions they can't. And then what ends up, unfortunately, is, you know, hopefully they can have a family member take the pet. But if not, then sometimes those pets go into, you know, local shelters or rescues and then have to find a new home when they didn't necessarily need to. So there are good aspects to legislation, and then there are some that need some work on from that aspect. Every year there's legislation proposed, not just for dogs, but you know, large animals too. So not sure what will be happening this year. We'll find out, and then the spring session, legislative session, there will probably be more you know, bills kind of proposed. So we'll just have to see when we get there.
Okay, what is the current tethering law?
The tethering law basically says that it makes a recommendation of the size of dealing with the size of the collar. Obviously, the collar needs to be appropriate, no choke chains, pinch collars, things like that on a dog 24/7. Those things are training items and should only be used for training, not to have a dog be outside with one of those types of collar situations. And then the size of the line, it needs to be a certain length long, so many feet long, and a certain weight, so to speak. So in other words, so that a miniature poodle is not put on a very heavy chain link.
Sure, that they can't drag around the
that
yard.
they can't drag around. You know, the area needs to be free so that the dog cannot become entangled and get into a strangling situation. And then they have to have, you know, food and water in that situation, and that they also need to have sheltering. There's been also some information as far as not having the dog be left out for a certain period of time. So that kind of gets a little bit of a gray area, because sometimes if you were to let a dog out for 15 minutes, that might not be long enough because they're going out investigating their environment and sniffing around, and it may take them a few more minutes to do their business. So as long as you know, be aware and, you know, again, be a good neighbor and don't leave your dog out and bark, make sure they have food, water, and, you know, and you bring them in a very reasonable amount of time, you shouldn't have any issues with that.
Okay, and that's kind of what your group does, right? You help oversee, and do you lobby or anything? Is that part of the group's mission?
We do some lobbying for some responsible legislation. Again, trying to take in what the existing laws are, how humane they are, and then what the new proposals are. So to try and encompass everybody within the, you know, new legislation.
Okay, so hard thing to do.
It is a hard thing to do. It's hard, you know, it's wanting to do the right thing by the animals, but then also, you know, some legislation can backfire, and if sometimes people realize or decide that they cannot work within the confines of new laws and legislations, they may decide that they can't move out of a housing situation, they can't afford a new situation, and so they may decide to give up their dog, and then you can cause a flood of shelters to be filling up unnecessarily. Breed-specific legislation has been very big, and currently in the Illinois Animal Welfare Act, that breed-specific legislation cannot occur in Illinois. Varying different communities try to come up with ordinances and such, and then end up finding out that things don't go very well for that. So. So it really, it sometimes can be difficult to weed through some of the information out there, so.
Well, and it's such a broad area too, I mean, you're talking breed-specific legislation, just animal legislation, and it's maybe an area we don't always think about because we're always hearing about other government legislations that affect people and things, but this is out there too.
Right.
With the animals, so that's good to know as well.
Right.
But we've got a few minutes left, and I noticed that your shirt says agility, agility, agility.
Yeah.
So is that something that you work with as well?
Right. I work with my dogs doing agility. I train other people to train their dogs doing agility. And I'll also handle other dogs for people in agility trials. So we'll work with anywhere from puppies, doing very light training, very easy. They don't start out with things that are high off the ground, such as the dog walker, the teeter. We start out with puppies with low to the ground tunnels and low jumps and things, and just try to let them kind of have fun from the beginning. And then depending upon whether a person wants to decide to get into competition with their dog, or whether they just kind of want to train in the backyard, we can kind of take some different avenues from there, but always with safety and fun in mind.
Sure, because agility, it can be a competition, right? Is it a type of training? Is that what you would consider it, or is it more like a sport?
It's an active, generally fast-paced, exciting sport. If you want to, get into the competition aspect of it, there are competitions across the country. There's actually a world team agility, and various different venues from AKC to USDAA to just so many different venues out there. Some of them are very highly competitive, and other ones are kind of more so for people who want to, just do something fun and bond with their dogs.
Sure, it sounds like a great bonding activity too. Do you find that most dogs like it? They want to work, they enjoy that?
I think that, the earlier that the dogs can start their training, that's definitely helpful. Certainly any dog can learn, learn some of the agility, and there are some breeds who are very prone to being very good and fast-paced at agility. Shelties are good, Border Collies are good, Golden Retrievers. I mean, there are so many that are really pretty good, and some of them are a little harder to work with. And I think sometimes that comes from the genetics of the breed.
Right.
So any dog can learn something. It just depends upon how far you kind of want to go with it and how quickly they take to it.
And is it something that's generally easy to get into? Do a lot of local areas have kind of an agility space or, dog clubs? Is it something easy to find?
Yeah, it depends. Sometimes you can find some local dog clubs. It's a little bit harder from central Illinois south. There really aren't very many southern, toward the southern parts of the state. And certainly more so toward Chicago and Wisconsin areas. There are quite a few dog training facilities up there that do agility. And they tend to be more so competition based. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, Jean Fisher from Villa Grove, thanks for coming down and talking about all things dogs, agility, and legislation. So I think we learned a lot today on the Paw Report. Thanks again for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us.
If you are a veterinarian, trainer, groomer, specialist, rescue organization, or shelter that would like to partner with the Paw Report by providing expert guests for the show, please contact us by emailing weiu@weiu.net or call 217-581-5956. If you have a topic you'd like to see on the show or questions for our experts, contact us with those too.
Did you know full episodes of the Paw Report are on YouTube? They can be accessed at www.youtube.com/WEIUTV. Then just go to the Paw Report playlist and select the episode you want to see. More information about the show is also available 24/7 on our website at weiu.net under the Television tab. Production for the Paw Report is made possible by
Inyart Tire and Auto Center in Charleston and Mattoon. Inyart offers complete auto repair. Inyart Tire and Auto Center cares about our community and thanks you for being a responsible pet owner. More information at inyart.com.